Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about critique. Some people love getting their stuff critiqued, some hate it, some have huge anxiety about it because they've had bad experiences or heard horror stories or are just very apprehensive about sharing generally. So let's go through what I think and practice as proper etiquette for giving critique. Let's go. Okay, so you've volunteered or been asked if you will critique a piece of work or a chapter of someone's book and you'd like to do it. How do you go about it? Is there a set way to approach it or to give feedback? In terms of structure, the answer is generally no, but in my opinion, in terms of attitude, then the answer is definitely yes. I think there are certain unspoken rules when it comes to giving feedback to someone that really just comes down to basic manners, and it can make all the difference to someone who was very nervous or apprehensive about putting their work out there. Now, we're all writers here, so we all know. We know that words have a lot of power, a lot of weight, and a lot of influence, especially when it comes to activities like critique, when you're putting something out there for direct criticism and for people to find and identify problems with your work. That's why I don't ever think it is necessary to use critique as an avenue to completely trample over someone else's work. And this brings me to Stace's first rule of critique: always be respectful. There is absolutely no reason to ever be purposefully rude, disrespectful, or wantonly negative towards a piece of work that you're critiquing. Even if you didn't like the piece, it takes no effort at all to remain respectful in your feedback towards another writer. I've heard plenty of people who've received just completely lethal, nasty feedback, and it makes me a little bit mad every time I hear about it, especially if the person critiquing is also a writer, and even more so if they've critiqued someone that they know is a new or even relatively new writer. In some cases, I have absolutely no doubt that that kind of critique will have snuffed out the will of many a writer to continue writing at all. Also, I am aware that some people prefer harsh critique, and that's completely fine if that's what they've requested, but if that's not the case, then respect costs nothing. So for me, it's always important to keep it at the forefront when you criticize work. Remaining respectful will allow you to point out issues or things that you don't feel are quite working without causing more upset in a situation that is stressful enough to deal with for many writers as it is. Now, I'm not suggesting that you can't point out bad stuff about people's work, because that would defeat the point of critique, because the aim is to give feedback that can help them to improve as a writer. I'm also not saying that you should dance on eggshells around people. I'm just saying to please consider how you phrase things and never be intentionally nasty towards someone else's efforts. Don't do this. This was the biggest piece of crap I have ever read. You've done so much stuff wrong. Your characters suck. You tell too much. There wasn't a single good thing about it. Do this. So personally, this wasn't my cup of tea, but I don't normally read in this genre. If you can, try and ask yourself what your character's motivations are and think about how you can bring them to the forefront a bit more, because at the moment they seem quite passive in a situation that, in my opinion, should see them being a bit more active. Rule number 2, be balanced. While the purpose of critique is to help people improve, it's also a great opportunity to let writers know what they're doing well. Now, you don't have to have one good thing for everything that needs improvement, but I do always mention what's good about a piece I look at as well as what needs a little bit of work. There's no reason not to, and it can help the writer out a lot to not just receive a list of things that need changing or that need work, which can often be really disheartening. So don't leave out the good stuff. Don't do this. So you need to go through again and remove all the filter words, you need to standardize your tense, you need to make your prose less purple, review continuity as there were some errors, blah blah blah, blah blah, blah blah blah. Do this. So the character point of view is really strong and it really stands out, but I'd consider going through and trying to get a rid of a few more filter words so that the reader can get a little closer to them. Your descriptions are really beautiful, but at times they seem a little bit wordy or a bit drawn out, and this broke my immersion at times. So perhaps consider focusing on them in an editing pass to make them a little bit more compact. Rule number 3, keep very new writers in mind. This is another personal one, but I scale down my critique when I'm looking at something written by a very, very new writer. Now, I definitely don't do this to patronize, but I do it because I don't think it's helpful to new writers to be critiqued as though they're someone who's been writing for like a decade. So if anything, it's likely to overwhelm them and discourage them with all the technical critique, so I tend to focus on the wider angle issues and may suggest resources or prompt them with questions that can help them moving forward in a general way. Now, that's not to say that I don't put the same amount of effort in with the feedback of newer writers. I treat them exactly the same, but I just adjust my critiquing lens depending on who I'm giving feedback to. Minute technical criticism isn't going to be as helpful to a new writer who is still discovering themselves with their first piece of writing, as it will be to someone who's been writing for longer, has an established style and voice, and a bit of a catalogue of knowledge behind them already. It's a little bit like a dance teacher correcting and expecting things of a beginner on day one in the same way that they correct and expect things of a seasoned stage professional. Don't do this. Hello, brand new writer. You need to go back through and work on story beats, character dynamics, showing instead of telling, get rid of all those adverbs, maybe reverse outlining might help, maybe try the snowflake method. Since it's your first chapter, you need to work on establishing the hook a bit more, blah blah blah, blah 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 blah. Do this. Okay, so your setting is really strong right from the start, but it might be helpful to do a little bit of research into the importance of opening chapters, because I think you can definitely manage to make the hook a bit stronger and pull people in a little bit quicker. The characters are unique and actually very distinct by themselves, but their interactions are a little bit awkward when I get the feeling that they should be gelling a lot better. So consider writing some practice scenes with them, maybe out of context, to help figure out their dynamics a little bit. Rule 4, don't let your personal preference dictate what's correct. So it can be difficult to keep a barrier between your personal preferences during critique, but it's something that has to be done, because suggesting to a writer that something is wrong just because it's a pet peeve of yours isn't productive or helpful. But overall, it's important to remember that everything you give as part of critique is just your own opinion anyway. And your opinions can be really, really helpful, so long as you don't frame your feedback in a way that says, this is wrong, you shouldn't do this, you need to rewrite it to be like this, and etc. Because there are many ways to write, many styles, many formats and processes, and just because it's not what you would do, it doesn't make it wrong. So keep this in mind when you critique. It's totally fine to bring up things that are your pet peeves and things that you don't like, because you won't be the only one who doesn't like that as a reader, but just make it clear and try to explain why you think it would be beneficial to the story to make that change. For instance, did it break immersion for you or stop you connecting with a character or something like that? Anything other than just, this is wrong, you shouldn't ever do this, because that's your preference. Don't do this. I hate characters being resurrected. You should never bring a character back from the dead. It's bad storytelling. If someone dies, they should stay dead. End of story. Do this. Okay, so personally, I'd suggest you consider whether or not your character really needs to be resurrected. As a reader, when characters get resurrected and the reason isn't really clear, it can kind of take away from their death in the first place, and it makes it seem a little bit trivial. This is just personal preference though, but overall it lowers the impact of any deaths that follow it too, because there's always going to be that question in the reader's mind of whether you're just going to bring them back or not. And this leads in and links to my last rule, Rule 5, back up your criticisms. It is important to actually think about the critique you're giving and why you're bringing up certain points. So explaining why you don't think something works is way more valuable than just pointing it out or making an offhand comment. It can also open up the writer to considering things in a different way, generally moving forward. So the most helpful critique is the one that points out the issue, but also gives an insight into why this is a problem for the person reading it. It will allow the writer of the piece to learn and improve in a much better, more organic way, which will serve them very well as they grow as a writer. A little bit like the show your workings part of maths problems, I guess. So never just list problems, take the time to explain why you see them as problems in the first place. Don't do this. Your protagonist is a boring character. Do this. So I wasn't really feeling much of a connection to the protagonist. For me, they just don't seem to jump off of the page as the protagonist. They're a tiny little bit flat at the moment. If, from my understanding, the other characters in the scene are meant to be supporting characters, then I'd like to see the protagonists set themselves aside from them a little bit more, because at the moment they all just seem on the same level. Let me know if that's not the case, or if they're just shy and prefer to blend in, but right now they don't feel like a main character, they feel a bit like part of the furniture. And if they're just really shy, it would benefit for the reader to be shown that a little more clearly through mannerisms or a close third point of view instead of an omniscient one, since it's a short story and you don't have much space to make that known. So be respectful, stay balanced, keep new writers in mind, remember that your own opinions are not writing rules, and always give an explanation. This year, I would love to spend a little more time critiquing for members of the writing server I'm part of on Discord, if I can find some free slots of time. And to anyone out there who already regularly helps other writers by giving up your time to critique and help them improve, then you have my thanks, because writers supporting other writers is a big passion of mine, especially if it can be done in a genuinely helpful, uplifting and respectful way. To anyone who's worried about offering to critique because you don't think you have anything of value to offer, you definitely do. You can provide a unique interpretation and viewpoint of the work that you're critiquing, and even just another set of eyes on something they've written is a huge help to any writer, so don't undervalue your helpfulness. For those who are scared or apprehensive about putting your work out there for critique, I completely understand, and I wish you only good experiences when you do decide to take that step forward. And if you do happen to have a bad experience of, critique that's clearly done just for the sake of being destructive rather than critical and constructive, then I hope you're able to overcome it and remember that all critique is just an opinion, so it doesn't make that person right, and you are well within your rights to push that type of critique aside and disagree. So tell me about a writer who's really made a difference to you through offering time to critique your work or help out in some other way. Let's continue to lift each other up, because we all know the struggles of writing and should be helping rather than hindering one another. My next video is going to be released on the 23rd of February, and I'm going to be continuing the critique topic this month with a similar video talking about beta readers and the responsibilities of both sides, the writer and the beta reader. So please subscribe and click the notification bell if you don't want to miss it. Keep on scribbling. I hope you're having a very productive 2020 so far, and I will see you guys on the next video. Bye guys!